Taken away by Smith on a breakaway. Doug Smith going in all alone. He can tie it up. He shoots and he scores! Doug Smith!
There's a system now to unlock this performance. System 438 is a model that helps every single brain get better. All right, let's get into it. So what you have on that card is what I'm going to deliver today. There is a systematic approach to mental performance. And the point I'd like to get across to everybody for this conference is that the physical trauma pales in comparison to the emotional trauma. I'm going to walk through this really quickly. I go story, science, solutions, a lot of pictures, a lot of video. So try to keep up. If I'm going too fast, raise your hand and we'll slow it down. So since I was a little kid, I've been passionate about performance. And I became passionate about recovery after I got injured. Now, where I got performance was right at the beginning. I was surrounded by talent. Now, if you look at this picture right here, 3 guys made it to the NHL. And I'll recognize them for you. John Olsen in the bottom, Chicago Blackhawks. Darren Pang, Chicago Blackhawks. Doug Smith. And then Jeff York, who just sold Farm Boy to Sobeys for $450 million, or $450 million in Canada. He won an NCAA championship with Princeton. So since the time I was little, I was always surrounded by talent. I was surrounded by ice. The Ottawa River we lived on the Ottawa River, and then across the street from my house was the outdoor rink. So I lived my childhood in skate guards, going back and forth from the ice to the ice. I was surrounded by love, and that allowed me to perform in school. I was the winner of the Scholastic Player of the Year when I was 17 in the OHL, and then off to the NHL I went. But I was surrounded by love, and we become what we're around. I'm going to prove that to you today. And I was surrounded by people who believed in me, like the general manager of the Los Angeles Kings. And then all of a sudden, I was in the NHL. At 18, I was drafted 2 weeks after I turned 18, the first year of the NHL draft. So Dale Hawerchuk, Doug Smith, Bobby Carpenter, Ron Francis. You might remember some of the other names. This is what I was doing at 18.
Scruton with it, back in the Kings zone, giving it to Hardy. Hardy up to center ice. Hardy to the red line, passing ahead to Doug Smith. Smith cutting in front, he shoots, he scores!
So this is all I knew. I didn't know anything else. My ego was in full check. I can promise you that. It was in full check. I was dating a Laker girl. Paula Abdul was her best friend because she was the choreographer of the Laker girls, right? And so I was spending my time driving my Porsche around LA with Laker girls and all that, just crazy stuff that I'm not going to get into. That's another presentation. We can talk about it after dinner. And then this happened. I went headfirst into the boards, full speed, shattered C5 and C6 in over 100 places, and I ended up a quadriplegic. This is the fifth cervical vertebrae, completely shattered. So I went into ICU. I was in ICU for 2 days, and they would give me so much morphine that my heart would stop. They'd have to make sure my heart was going, just because of the level of pain of such an injury. I'd like to ask everybody a question, because this is about performance, and let's get some movement going on. If you want to perform better, can you please stand up? Your manner or quality of functioning, right? If you want to perform better, stand up. Okay? Yeah, everybody should be standing, right? That's why you came. Now, if you suffer from trauma, I'd like you to sit down, please. So go ahead and sit down. Yeah, that's okay. Okay, so take it easy. Everybody take a look around. This is your disturbing and distressful experience. Okay, that's about 25% of the room. Go ahead and sit down. Take a break, take a break. We'll talk about this later. Where does trauma come from? So this is going to be a little bit of education on trauma. I spent a lot of time thinking about it. It took 13 years for me to learn how to skate again. I was in a hospital for a year. I was on 250 milligrams of morphine a day, and the only way I kept my bladder functioning again after paralysis was to stop the morphine. So if you're having trouble with bodily functions and you're on medication, take a chance and try getting off the medication. Where does it come from? This is where it comes from. People have a misunderstanding about what trauma is. Trauma is trauma is trauma. They always call it by a symptom of trauma. They don't call it trauma. Where does it come from? These places. And I'm not going to read it to you because I think you guys can all read probably, right? Undiagnosed symptoms of trauma. We've all sort of experienced those things, right? What are the diagnosed symptoms of trauma? This is right out of the medical system, this information. So, what conditions? There's conditions caused by trauma. These are all symptoms, right? All symptoms of the same thing. So why aren't we spending more time time on trauma and not just the symptoms? We have a challenge to solve that we can solve together. We all suffer from trauma. It causes a disruption inside of us. That's what it does to us. It just causes a disruption. Can I get a show of hands for anybody here that felt that disruption? And it happens between the conscious and the subconscious mind. And the subconscious brain controls us. A better understanding of trauma is good for people and is great for the bottom line. This is my second book. I wrote Thriving in Transition, and then the scientific community approached me and said, let's marry your story to the science and we'll put a model together. And that's been 12 years of work to get the model to where you have it right now in your system. But Jack Canfield stepped up, Ivan Meisner, Ron McLean, to help me put something together that gave people a solution that just didn't tell a story. And then, these organizations are the people I've been speaking to in Canada and the US. The Transition Assistance Program in Virginia was fantastic. Catherine Eads is here from the reserve component of the Transition Assistance Advisors. And the forces, because trauma is high on their agenda right now in figuring this out. And it's the top people that have to understand it. And what you're going to learn about trauma and about corporations and about purpose this week is going to serve everybody well. And then I end up, this is where System 438 came from when I broke my neck. So lying in ICU when your life is in the balance, you have a lot to think about. And it started here, but it's taken almost 20 years to get it boiled down to a point where I've been in front of medical audiences and business audiences, taken all the feedback, gone back home, worked hard at it to get it down to a system that everybody can understand. There are 4 types of trauma we experience. There are only 4. Nobody experiences 5 from what we can tell. 3 priorities of our subconscious brain, because your subconscious brain controls you. And then 8 behaviors to cultivate. Here are the 4 types of trauma that we experience. Catastrophic physical. Do you know when you've had a catastrophic physical trauma? You can see it, right? So you do something about it. Catastrophic emotional trauma. We know when we suffer it, you can't hide it from people. And so you do something about it. You acknowledge it. Cumulative physical trauma, like hitting your head with a soccer ball over and over and over. We know it's wrong, but we keep doing it, even though the science says not to. So we can see it. It's easy to see now. And then cumulative emotional trauma. This is our ticking time bomb. Because we don't have the ability to see it. That's why we feel like not going to the office on Monday morning. That's why we get nervous and anxious when we're going into meetings. This is the trauma that if we spend our time focused on it, and it's highlighted in the document, cumulative emotional trauma is the only type of trauma that you really need to spend your time on, because the other ones you're going to do something about regardless. So it's our greatest cost emotionally, physically, and financially, bar none. And I'm not going to get into spreadsheets right now, but I can show you spreadsheets and the return. I just don't have time right now. When we understand the nature of trauma, life falls into place. This has been my experience. It just starts to fall into place. Let me introduce you to your subconscious mind. This is your subconscious mind. It looks the same for all of us. It's an 800-pound gorilla, and it does whatever it wants. It controls 95% of your human functioning. So if you're going to try to get something out of your conscious thinking to perform better, it's going to be a real struggle. If you go after the subconscious brain and you work on the 95% of our human functioning, it only has 3 priorities. There's only 3 things you have to worry about. And as soon as you start serving these 3 priorities, your life will change. You'll watch it gradually change. It's like meditation. It gradually changes. It doesn't change the first time you meditate. It doesn't change the first time you use it. Here's the first priority, meeting basic needs. Not Maslow's hierarchy. Maslow's hierarchy was not incorrect, but it was incomplete. I'm not going to get into it, but I'm able to demonstrate how it was missing certain pieces that we now have established. Clarity of thought. The scientific studies are off the charts. We all know that. They're about that high. Mindfulness-based stress reduction, University of Massachusetts. We're doing this. There's people doing this, changing their life just by thinking and helping other people. Helping other people is a priority to us. We all love it when we help other people. Nobody can deny that. And now the science is showing us that it's absolutely true. There are 8 behaviors to cultivate, and this is where my story comes in. So I learned these 8 behaviors in a specific order, starting with belief in self. But the way that we teach them starts with awareness, which is on the card. So you're going to see them in the order I learned them. You can sort through in your own mind when you learn these behaviors in your life, or whether there's behaviors that are up here that you haven't learned yet that you could maybe supplement with. These feed the priorities. Behavior 1, belief in self. So I was a Forrest Gump baby. I was put into ankle to hip leg braces when I learned how to walk, because I had rickets, believe it or not. So I would go to the tennis club with my mom and dad, who were both competitive tennis players, and my mom would protect me like a lion, and she would never let anybody say that I couldn't do anything. And when I get out of the leg braces, it was the movie Forrest Gump. I can't not watch it when it comes on at 3 o'clock in the morning. Just because I started running when they took the leg braces off, and I never stopped running. And then I started skating, and I never stopped skating, because I have that, whenever I get confined in my legs, you know that feeling when your legs get all the energy and you stretch them out? That's what it was like for me when I was a child. Belief in self is an unlimited gift we can give. My mom built my belief. She died at 52 of cancer, unfortunately. She got cancer a month and a half after I was paralyzed. She used to drive 500 miles. She would drive from Ottawa to Windsor for one game. And I'm so thankful that Brian Kilray, the coach of the Ottawa 67s, didn't let her go on the bus, because she wanted to go on the bus. And that would have been very inconvenient for me. Behavior 2, motivation. Autonomy, competence, and relatedness. This is the science. The self-determination theory is really all you have to study. And if you don't break the rules of self-determination theory, you're going to be fine on the motivation piece. Behavior 3, focus. I was diagnosed with ADHD when I was 12. And there was a tough decision my parents had to make, whether to put me on medication or not. And instead of putting me on medication, my mom took me to transcendental meditation. And I learned transcendental meditation when I was 12, 13 years old, and it was like being locked in a cage for the first month or so. I couldn't stand it. And now it's amazing. I use it all the time. I used it this afternoon, but when I broke my neck, I was able to escape, because when you're paralyzed from the chest down, being awake is hell. So I needed to be able to escape, and I use meditation to do that, to build focus. Trust. This is where we built trust. I grew up with these guys, and without trust, what do you have? You know, when we trust each other, we can rapidly internalize each other's belief in one another. As soon as trust exists, I can rapidly internalize your belief in me if I trust you and you trust me. What a powerful tool that is, right? Let's learn how to use trust better. And then all of a sudden, boom, I have 4 behaviors off the list of 8, and I made it to the NHL. I didn't need awareness. I didn't need emotional control. I didn't need to ask for help. Those are the other ones. So I ended up in LA. I get to LA. This was my first office. Never had a job in my life. They put me in the airport park. Now, this is the first year of the 18-year-old draft, okay? So they put me in the airport park hotel in the parking lot of the Forum. They left me there for 2 months. They never talked to me, never said anything to me, just left me, an 18-year-old. I went and bought a Porsche cash off the showroom floor at Circle Porsche Audi in Long Beach. They weren't paying attention to anything I was doing. The guys in the team were pissed off I got a Porsche because nobody else had Porsches back then, because they were making about 100 grand, 80 grand a year, right? So I bought a Porsche. So nobody was monitoring how I was going to get attacked by everybody else on the team, like seriously attacked. So this stuff kept going. The GM was an alcoholic. There was changes that needed to be made, and I'm sitting in LA. After 3 years, I asked to be traded. Year 3, they didn't trade me. I ended up in the press box, 2nd pick overall, ends up in the press box, unable to play, just because I was mentally unable, not because I was physically unable. I just wanted out. They hired Pat Quinn. The LA Kings hired Pat Quinn. Pat Quinn was the first guy in 5 years that sat me down and said, "What do you want to achieve?" And I said I wanted to be traded, and he traded me. Scotty Bowman stepped in. Buffalo Sabres traded for me. Larry Playfair went to LA. I went to Buffalo, arrived in Buffalo. Scotty Bowman, the winningest coach of all time, picked me up at the airport. And on the way to the hotel, he told me he'd been trying to trade for me for 4 years. And he thought I could be one of the best players in the league. The next night I went out, and I scored 13 seconds into my first game. He started me at center ice. I scored 13 seconds into my first game. I was the first star of the game. This goal was in the 4th game with the Buffalo Sabres. And my line within 5 games of playing for the Sabres was the top line in the National Hockey League. Mike Foligno, Paul Cyr, and Doug Smith, 27 points in 5 games we had between us. And it had nothing to do with my physical ability. 0. Stuff like this was happening. This doesn't happen every day. In fact, I haven't seen it before. I like showing goals against Toronto. Have you noticed? We'll see it one more time.
I've never seen a goal like this. He wants to shoot this puck in. Just shoot it in. All right, I'll shoot it in. There it goes. Around the glass. No. Hits the boards, and there goes Reagan. Whoa.
I sent this to Glenn Reagan, actually, the goalie. I bet he doesn't have it in his presentation book. And then this happened. So the impact force was the same as going from 0 to 60 miles an hour in a third of a second. So all the measurements of the impact force, because I was going I was doing about 25 kilometers an hour when I went into the boards. And so we worked out the force impact of that. And I went in pile driver. So it was a compression explosion of C5 and C6 in my neck, and I landed with my head on my gloves. So I stayed in that position right there for 6 hours. And then I had to lie on the table. They wanted to put me to sleep to put 4 bolts, 3 millimeters into my skull. And I didn't want to go to sleep because I had a broken neck. So we did local. So I know what it's like to have 4 screws. These are self-tapping screws, by the way. So awareness. I became aware for the first time in my life. When I hit the boards, all I saw was all the times that I had not shown up for people and all the people I had hurt. I literally made a list in my head when I was lying on the ice in the first 25 seconds of that impact. So I was that close to death, and all I could see was the times I didn't show up. I didn't see all the goals I'd scored, all the great things people said about me. I didn't see any of that. None of it. So I became aware. So this was what happened. Behavior 6, asking for help. Helping other people is a priority of the subconscious brain. So asking for help is a behavior that you can use and cultivate. Because if everybody wants to help you, if you can just learn how to ask for help, I was taught that asking for help was a sign of weakness, not a sign of strength. So I knew nothing of asking for help. And even today, my daughters today, they tell me all the time, you know, and they remind me. And I'm okay with them reminding me. Before, I would have gotten angry. Emotional control. This was the toughest one for me because I was taught that losing emotional control was an asset. Because when I lost emotional control, I got all fired up. I always got a pat in the back. Whenever I got in a fight in hockey and went to the penalty box and then they came back to the bench, I got a pat on the back.
Shoots the weak one. Layuk able to cover it as Helkinas was all over him, and now Merson is all over Helkinas. Oh, that's for the third man there. Starting to get involved there. He was pushed away. Johnson East will go after him now. We got the name on the center. We got 3 fights going on here. One up to Jim, and he's on the other side. The linesmen are all signed up elsewhere, so they're going to let these fights.
So emotional control is behavior number 7. Behavior number 8, purpose. Write it down. That's my purpose. It's what I do now. It's all I do. I work on that all the time. I was working on it this afternoon. My passion is systems for performance and recovery. So if you're interested in either performance or recovery, and they're the same word, by the way, you can't tell the difference. I can't tell the difference. And if you could tell the difference, let me know. But they're both the same. You can be a prisoner of your trauma and not even be aware of it. You back yourself into a jail cell, you'll throw the keys outside the cell. That's what happens with trauma. That's what it does to us if we're not aware. Free bonus package if you understand trauma. You get all these things. They come with it. They come with the awareness. Rule 1. Kurt's got 5 rules, so I got 5 rules. I didn't want him to outdo me. Coding and consciousness. This is how the brain works. The brain codes itself before it becomes conscious. So if you're in a business, everything you're doing to your people is being coded. They get coded. We get coded first. Coding, then consciousness. These are the latest books. Georg Northoff is a friend of mine. He's the leader in Canada in psychiatry, in mental health right now. And he's written 2 encyclopedias to prove to people that there's a gap between coding and consciousness, and we're not even aware of it. So you can't help becoming what you're around. You can't help it. Do not ignore trauma. If you ignore it, dismiss it, it'll cause you to behave unproductively. And you won't know why. Somebody will say, why are you doing that? That's hurting your performance. And you'll look at them and go, you'll get mad at them. And that's why people lunge out at you to fight you when you talk to their trauma. If they don't know they have trauma and you try to talk to it, that's going to cause a fight. Injury is to the body as trauma is to the psyche. Anatomy of trauma, my story is there from a clinician standpoint. At Anatomy of Trauma. Trauma will always be with you, but trauma does not need to control you. You don't make trauma go away. It doesn't go away. It's always with you. But you can manage it. That's the thing about it. We're able to manage it. Use a system. Rule 5, a systematic approach. I always thank the teams I played for. I never did when I was there. I never said thank you to anybody. You know, you'd think that when you arrived at an NHL team, you go up to the head office and you go in and shake everybody's hand like I went around and shook everybody. Nobody ever taught me how to do that. And they're not teaching them how to do it even today. But thank you to these teams. And thank you. When I was paralyzed, it was a week after my second daughter was born, the brunette. So the blonde was 2, and we had a newborn a week before. And my wife and I are celebrating our 35th wedding anniversary in August. So we did it. These are my grandsons from my youngest daughter. From the daughter who was born a week before I was paralyzed. This is Jack and Walker. And love them like crazy. If you suffer from trauma, can you please stand up for me? Gonna stay? Yeah, okay. All right. Well, I would say that's a success. We went from about 25% to about 80%. Excellent. Thank you very much.